Subscribe if you dare, like if you're brave, and comment if you think you'd survive a place like this. Now, let's dive into the darkness. The storm rolled over Denver like a warning. Thunder cracked through the sky as U.S. Marshals tore down the interstate, sirens cutting through the night. In the back of the armored transport van sat the man the entire country had been talking about for weeks, Elias Cade, a prisoner whose crimes were whispered more than spoken, whose presence alone forced high-security protocols to tighten across multiple states. But tonight wasn't about his crimes. Tonight was about something far more unsettling. Because Elias hadn't spoken a single word since his arrest. Not to detectives. Not to lawyers. Not even when a federal judge asked him to confirm his own name. He simply watched everyone with that unblinking calm, as if he already knew something they didn't. As the van sped through sheets of rain, Deputy Marshal Rourke checked the restraints again. Hands locked. Feet shackled. Waist chains secured. And yet, something in Rourke's gut twisted. Everyone said the same thing after spending time around Elias. There's something off about him, something you can't explain. Rourke tried shaking the thought from his head. The case was simple enough, or at least it should have been. 3 months earlier, a warehouse in northern Colorado had gone up in flames. By the time responders arrived, half the building had collapsed, and inside they found something investigators would later describe as organized chaos. Maps pinned to walls. Dozens of surveillance photos. Cryptic notes written in different handwriting styles. And in the center of it all, a single steel chair bolted to the concrete floor. No victim. No blood. No clear crime scene. Just evidence of something planned. Something big. Hours later, Elias Cade was arrested just 2 blocks away, walking calmly down the street with soot on his clothes and a backpack filled with classified facility blueprints he shouldn't have had access to. When asked what the documents were for, he simply smiled. Not one detective ever forgot that smile. Now, as the van approached Florence, home to ADX, the most restrictive prison in the United States, Rourke felt the temperature in the vehicle drop. Elias didn't move. But he stared directly at Rourke, almost reading him. "You chose the wrong assignment," Elias finally whispered. They were the first words he had spoken since his arrest. Rourke's hand froze on the radio. "What did you say?" Elias leaned back, chains rattling faintly. "They're waiting for me. You should have left me where I was." Before Rourke could press him, the entire van jolted violently. Tires skidded. Metal screamed. The storm swallowed everything in deafening noise. The driver fought to regain control, but the van spun sideways, slamming to a stop at the edge of a drainage ditch. Sirens inside the vehicle blared. Rourke tasted blood from where his head hit the window. He reached for his weapon as instinct kicked in. But Elias wasn't trying to escape. He was sitting perfectly still, eyes fixed forward. Rourke forced the door open and climbed out into the rain. Lightning lit up the highway. That's when he saw it. A black SUV parked at an angle across the road. No license plates. No headlights. No movement. His pulse shot through his throat. This wasn't an accident. Someone had forced the van off the highway. Backup arrived minutes later, but the SUV was empty. No tracks. No sign of who had been there. Just silence. Rourke felt Elias watching him through the cracked windshield, calm as ever, almost smug. By the time they reached ADX, rumors were already spreading. Someone had tried to intercept the transport. Someone who knew the route, the timing, the personnel. Even worse, someone who wanted Elias. Inside the processing wing, Warden Hale kept stealing glances at Elias' file. It was thick. Too thick for someone with no confirmed victims, no confession, and no clear motive. The FBI still couldn't explain half of what had been found in the warehouse. All they knew was this. Elias Cade had been planning something. And whatever it was, someone else wanted it too. As the final steel door slammed shut behind him, Elias turned to Hale with that same quiet calm. "It's already started," he murmured. Hale stiffened. "What started?" Elias smiled again, slow, deliberate, unsettling. "You'll know when you hear the first alarm." That night, a guard doing routine rounds noticed something strange at the end of Elias' corridor. A single envelope lay outside his cell. No name. No markings. No fingerprints. But inside was a photograph of someone the prison thought they'd never see again. And that discovery changed everything. The photograph slid from the guard's trembling hand and landed face up on the polished concrete floor. The image was grainy, shot from a distance, but there was no mistaking the face. Detective Sarah Vance, the lead investigator who had been reported missing just 2 weeks earlier. The woman who was last seen entering the burned warehouse the night before it exploded. The woman who had spent months chasing Elias Cade. And now, there she was alive. Standing outside what looked like an abandoned industrial lot, staring straight into the camera. The guard reported it to Warden Hale immediately. Within minutes, the prison shifted into silent chaos, hushed radio traffic, locked doors, and an emergency briefing that felt more like a classified briefing than a prison procedure. Hale studied the photograph again, jaw tight. How in God's name did this get inside one of the most secure prison wings in America? He muttered. There was no answer. No cameras caught anyone entering the corridor. No guards admitted handling the envelope. It had simply appeared. And Elias was the only inmate who could see that stretch of hallway. When Hale visited his cell, Elias was already standing at the door, hands loosely clasped behind his back, waiting as if he had anticipated this exact moment. "You're going to ask if I put it there," he said softly. "I didn't ask you anything," Hale replied. "You didn't have to." Hale held up the photograph. "Where's she?" Elias didn't blink. "Alive. For now." Hale felt anger rising from a deeper place, not just professional duty, but fear. Vance had been respected, relentless, driven by a sense of justice few investigators carried anymore. Losing her had gutted the task force. Finding her alive should have been good news, yet nothing about this felt like salvation. It felt like a threat. "Tell me where she is," Hale demanded. But Elias only stepped back, expression unreadable. "If I tell you now, you'll shut down the wrong doors, lock the wrong cells, trust the wrong people." "Meaning what?" "There are more pieces on the board than you realize. Some of them wear badges." Hale's voice hardened. "You're lying." Elias tilted his head, almost sympathetic. "I told you. The first alarm will tell you I'm right." Hale left the cell more unsettled than he'd ever admit. 200 miles away, federal analysts were still trying to figure out how the transport SUV had reached that highway undetected. No traffic cams saw it. No witnesses came forward. It was almost as if whoever orchestrated the ambush knew exactly which blind spots to disappear through. And the deeper they dug, the stranger it got. The SUV's tire tracks matched an industrial-strength model used by private security firms. A bolt found near the crash site matched a company that manufactured surveillance-grade vehicle parts. And the soot on Elias' jacket the night of his arrest? Lab reports confirmed it didn't come from the warehouse fire. It came from 2 fires at 2 different locations. Someone had been moving through Colorado that night, starting blazes with surgical precision. Someone with resources, intel, and purpose. And Elias was at the center of it, but not in the way they expected. Back inside ADX, one of the night shift officers, Daniels, reviewed footage from the corridor where the envelope had appeared. He rewound the clip again and again. At 2:14 a.m., the hallway was empty. At 2 hours 14 minutes and 11 seconds, the hallway was still empty. No shadows. No footsteps. Nothing. But at 2 hours 14 minutes and 12 seconds, the envelope was suddenly on the ground. It hadn't fallen from the ceiling or slid under a door. It wasn't thrown from off-screen. One frame, nothing. Next frame, envelope. Daniels leaned closer. This had to be a glitch, a corrupted file, a skipped frame. But the timestamp didn't skip. The footage flowed normally. Nothing was missing. He rubbed his eyes and replayed it again. Same result. The envelope just appeared. His hands shook as he picked up the phone to report it. But before he could dial, the prison lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the alarm howled through the facility, a sound so loud it rattled the reinforced vents. The first alarm. Hale sprinted through the control wing as red lights strobed across the walls. What triggered it? "Talk to me," a technician shouted back. "Power surge on the east block." Something hit our grid. We're isolating. And then every monitor in the room flickered. The security feed sharpened. The hallway outside Elias' cell appeared. A single guard was standing there, frozen, staring at something on the floor. An envelope. Another one. But this time there was writing on it. Hale grabbed the mic. Do not touch it. Step away now. But the guard was already reaching down. Hale's breath caught. Inside the cell, Elias slowly sat on the edge of his bed, listening, waiting. The envelope opened. A small card slid out. The guard lifted it, confused. Then his eyes widened in horror. On the card was a single sentence. You're next. Hale slammed his hand on the desk. Get him out of there. Move. But it was already too late. The guard staggered backward, clutching the wall. His radio fell and clattered on the floor. As officers rushed to the scene, the camera caught one last detail. On the back of the card was the same industrial lot from the first photograph. The same place Detective Ants had been seen alive. But this time there was something new. A timestamp. Tonight. 11:47 p.m., which was only 3 hours away. And underneath the timestamp, scrawled in precise, deliberate handwriting, he isn't the one you should fear. Hale felt his blood run cold, because whoever had written that was still out there, watching, planning. And Elias wasn't the threat. He was the target. The clock inside the command center hit 8:47 p.m., exactly 3 hours before the timestamp found on the second card. ADX was locked down tighter than a vault, yet the tension inside the facility felt like an electric wire stretched to its limit. Warden Hale stood over the evidence table, staring at the two photographs. Detective Sarah Vance alive. And now the empty industrial lot, the same place she had been seen in, now tied to the guard who collapsed moments after opening the envelope. EMTs had checked him. No injuries. No toxins. Just shock, fear, and one whispered statement. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. Hale turned to Daniels, the officer who had found the first envelope. You said it just appeared on the footage. No one delivered it. Daniels swallowed hard. Sir, I watched the frames again. And again. The envelope didn't come from a person. It came from a blind spot. What blind spot? Daniels hesitated. The only one in ADX. The one our cameras can't see because the timeline shifts by 1 second. Hale stared at him. You're telling me someone timed a delivery to a millisecond window even our own staff didn't know about? Yes, sir. The room chilled. Someone out there knew ADX's deepest flaws. Someone who had been inside before, maybe not physically, but operationally. And that meant the notes weren't an intimidation tactic. They were instructions. 11:02 p.m. The industrial lot was a hollow concrete graveyard at the edge of the city. Old pipes, rusted storage containers, and a warehouse with boarded windows that looked ready to collapse. Flashlights cut through the darkness as Hale arrived with a small team of federal agents. Rain misted across the cracked pavement. They moved carefully, silently. This was the location in both photographs, the burned warehouse and the timestamp message. If Sarah Vance was alive, this was their only chance to find her. Hale kept checking the time. 11:23 p.m. 11:40, p.m. 11:40, p.m. Fan out, he ordered. We search every inch. But as the agents spread out, Hale noticed something strange near the warehouse wall, a faint blue glow, almost like a reflection. He knelt, brushing away debris. A camera lens. A live one. He looked up sharply. We're being watched. Before anyone could respond, one of the agents called out, Sir, you need to see this. Hale rushed over. There, leaning against an old steel beam, was another envelope. This one larger, waterproofed, sealed with industrial tape. Written on the front, in the same unsettling handwriting. Open only when all of you are here. Hale looked around. All 6 agents stood together. The warehouse swallowed the sound of their breathing. He tore the envelope open. Inside was a stack of documents, timestamp logs, energy grid maps, and internal memos from the facility. All were authentic. All were sensitive. And every single page was stamped with one classification label. ADX, internal use only. One of the agents whispered. How did this get out of the prison? Another page slid free. A surveillance still. Sarah Vance, tied to a chair, looking exhausted but very much alive. Behind her stood someone wearing a tactical mask, a man with the build of a trained operator, someone who moved with intent, someone who wasn't working alone. Hale turned the photo over. On the back was a final message. Elias didn't burn that warehouse. He tried to stop the ones who did. Hale's heart pounded. They're framing him, he whispered. Another page emerged, a blueprint of the warehouse, marked with red ink. Points of entry, timers, escape routes, routes that didn't match any known plan Elias had been connected to. And at the bottom of the envelope lay one final object, a USB drive. The agents exchanged uneasy glances. Sir, this could be a trap. Hale shook his head. No. This is the truth someone wants us to see. He plugged the drive into a secure tablet. A video opened instantly. The view was shaky, filmed in a dark room. Sarah Vance sat tied to a chair. The masked figure paced behind her. His voice was distorted. She got too close, he said. So, did he? He leaned closer to the camera. You think Elias Cade is dangerous? He's the only one who figured out what we were building. Hale froze. Building? The masked man continued, but his silence didn't help him. It only protected us. And now, the moment we finish what he almost exposed, none of this will matter. He stepped out of frame. Check the time, he said calmly. You're late. Hale looked down. 11:47 p.m. Before the team could react, the warehouse floor beneath them vibrated, a deep, mechanical hum rising from below. What is that? An agent whispered. Hale's voice cracked. Everyone out. Move. But it was too late. The ground split open like a mechanical jaw, panels shifting, metal grinding. A freight elevator they hadn't seen before, because it wasn't part of the original building plans, rose from the floor. And inside the elevator was Sarah Vance, unharmed, untied, her eyes wide with urgent fear. Run, she yelled. He's not after me. He's coming for Elias. A deafening blast cut her off as every light in the lot exploded into darkness. Back in ADX, alarms blared, doors locked. Guards sprinted down hallways as a voice crackled over the intercom. Unidentified breach detected in cell block Echo. Echo block, where Elias was housed. Hale grabbed his radio, shouting into the storm of noise. Do not open his cell. He's the target, not the threat. You need to. The transmission cut out. Static swallowed his voice. Inside Echo block, the corridor lights flickered violently. The guard nearest Elias' cell stumbled backward as the steel door's locks disengaged one by one. Not from inside. From the external control panels. A shadow moved down the corridor. Slow. Deliberate. Purposeful. Elias stood in the center of his cell, hands lowered, no resistance. As the final lock disengaged, he looked up, expression calm, almost resigned. You're late, he said. The masked man stepped into view. But there was something different in his posture now, a tension, a fury, a personal edge. He reached for Elias. And Elias whispered something too quiet for the cameras to catch. The masked man froze. Just for a moment. But a moment was enough. Backup stormed down the hall. Shouts exploded. The masked intruder bolted, vanishing into the next corridor with impossible speed. Purposeful, rehearsed. Guards swarmed the area. Elias remained still. Hale's voice finally broke through the comms. Don't lose him. He's the real threat. But by the time officers reached the exit tunnel, the masked figure was gone, leaving behind nothing but a single card taped to the wall. 6 words. 6 words that would change every report, every interview, every headline. We were never working with him. The investigation would reveal the rest in time, the covert network, the sabotage, the reason Elias had been preparing to expose them. But the final twist came from Sarah Vance herself. When questioned later, she confirmed one chilling truth. Elias Cade wasn't trying to escape anyone. He had been trying to warn them. Because the masked intruder, the true mastermind, wasn't finished. And 2 weeks later, when a second facility reported a breach with the same signature, they realized something even darker. Elias wasn't the reason ADX tightened its restrictions. He was the reason it wasn't strong enough. If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.